one.
We are coming at you with a whole lot of depth next on Sports Bar. Hello, welcome into another edition of Sports Bar. I'm David Jackson, joined by the full crew once again, and we've got a lot to discuss here this evening. Full slate of football, college, NFL, also Appalachian basketball getting started over the weekend as well. As we'll start first on the football side, and the Apps got back on the winning track out in Idaho. Had to go a long way out there to get the job done, but they got the job done. 27-point win, take that into the bye week. Overall, a pretty solid way to finish up what was a grueling 7-game stretch.
Yeah, what about them coming out and running the ball the way that they did? I think it was a good way to bounce back after struggling against Arkansas State and saying, hey, this is our game, and yeah, we got knocked down, but we're still going to do this. They didn't abandon what they're good at, and I really respect that because they needed to show teams that, hey, this isn't going to shake us.
Yeah, and if you didn't like our running back depth before this game, you certainly do now.
Yeah.
I mean, breaking the freshman rushing records for a single game with Jalen Moore, I mean, that was very impressive, and he is so shifty. Like, I didn't really notice that so much in the earlier games. I noticed he was very athletic, but man, can he really, cut back. So, that position I think is in good shape for a long time.
Yeah, no, you could definitely see the fire coming out of them, especially right when they came onto the field. You could tell that they were not there to, say, oh, look at us. We're still a good team. They wanted to show everyone, we're here to prove that we are the team that we've been the rest of the season. And that game was kind of, we had some issues, but let's forget about it and move on. It felt very similar to how they came back after the Clemson game and kind of said, we are a dominant team. Yeah. Let's prove it. Not, they weren't licking their wounds in any way.
Also didn't help that, or it did help that we were playing Idaho.
Yeah, it definitely helps, but you need that.
Even though they some rushing yards.
Yeah, just a few.
Yeah.
But that shows what health was. We talked about health last week, and a healthy Jesse Chapman moved. Parker Collins back to his natural spot moved. Colmar back to his natural spot. I mean, everybody was, it seemed like a group more in sync. And then you flip that over to the defensive side of the ball, limiting an Idaho team that had really scored the ball well over a 2-week period. I mean, they were averaging 45 points, almost 500 yards a game in the two prior to Appalachian coming in. Even though they lost both of those games, Appalachian was able to kind of stymie that, cut those totals in half and return to some of that defensive swagger. I think that's the way this team is going to win, with a little bit of attitude on defense and with certainly a lot of physicality on the offense.
Yeah, well, and it was nice. I know that Satterfield had said after the game against Arkansas State that, he wanted to get these guys comfortable with each other because that was a big issue, is that they hadn't meshed yet. They didn't have that togetherness and that kind of camaraderie that the rest of the team had been experiencing for the rest of the season. So it was good to see that they were able to kind of get back to that. I think that the time that they spent on the plane too, I'm sure, but they got a lot of togetherness to kind of get everything going the way it needed to go, for sure.
Yeah, and stopping the running back for Idaho, I mean, there's something to be said for that because Penny is a big guy.
Yeah.
He's 6'2", north of 200 pounds, and had been running the ball very well this year. So good job by the front seven to shut him down and get back, like you said, to stuff in the run that we didn't do against Arkansas State.
So 2 games left before the regular season is over, and then we'll talk bowl games after that. But curious to know from a student's perspective, that next home game after the bye week will be the Lafayette game, and that's Thanksgiving Saturday. What makes you come back to Boone for that game?
I think you got to realize what we're witnessing as far as App State football goes. I mean, this is a part of what's going to be, it looks like a really great future of this program, and you're getting to get in on the ground floor. We saw it last year. We talked about, that was the upswing. Now we're seeing them get in, they're in bowl contention now, and they're really starting to. This is going to slate where they end up at the end of the season. And if you want, I don't know. I couldn't imagine not being a part of it. I
Yeah.
guess is my side of it. But why not go out and be a part of this? I mean, it's not on Thanksgiving. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like you can make the
3
trip
days
back.
after.
I would think most people should be able to make the
Food
trip back.
services will be open starting
Oh, there we
Saturday
go. We can
morning
eat.
too. Dorms are open all weekend, so
Yeah,
you got
no, I
that
think
going for you.
it comes from a little bit of the point too. It's kind of like, after the Michigan win, everyone kind of wanted to say, I was there,
Yeah.
I was a part of that. And I think that this is such a turning point for the team, or, the last, season and a half or whatnot
Yeah.
has been. I think it's exciting to think back, 5 years from now or 10 years from now to say, like, I was there when this
Yeah.
all was coming forward. And you don't want to miss that. I know a lot of people are coming back just because they want to be able to say that they were there, not even because they're even that excited about the game. They just don't want to miss it from they don't want people to be like, oh, well, you missed a great game. You missed it. So.
Yeah, well, I'll be at this game just because I'll most likely be working the game anyway. But
Requirements.
Yeah, but I mean, when the schedule first came out, and I saw that Lafayette, would be our home game and it would be later in the season. I was thinking, oh, well, this game will probably be one of those games that decides who wins the Sun Belt. Now that's kind of shaken out to where it might not necessarily be the case. However, I think it's still a very entertaining game.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
I would much rather be playing Lafayette in this game than maybe Georgia State, just because if you're going to get people to come back up the mountain, better against Lafayette than Georgia State.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I mean we're going to be favored against Lafayette, but I think you make a good point with the Georgia State thing. Like no one's going to want to make the trip if we're just going to roll an opponent. They're going to, I think more people would be willing to be like, well, I mean, if we're expected to beat them by 30, I'll just
Watch it
eat
on
turkey
TV
and watch it
or,
over the house.
And if we've learned anything from the Troy game,
Yeah, that too.
it's most likely going to be pretty competitive.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and Lafayette will be playing for bowl eligibility
Yeah, they will be.
themselves. They've got 3
Yeah.
games to go, sitting on 5 losses right now, so they've got a razor-thin margin of error.
A bit of a fire underneath them.
Right, but they're a team that, as everybody learns more about the Sun Belt, this is a perennial contender. And and they are a team that has not only been to bowl games, but won them, been very successful in the postseason. So hopefully we'll see a good crowd here for the final game for 21 seniors that will be honored before that game. So that should be exciting. Before we get too deep into college and NFL football, let's switch over to basketball real quick on campus. Both the men and women started their season this past week. Even though the women lost, very competitive against a Liberty team that's usually like a top 20 caliber team. So good to see them competitive. Of course, the men got their win over Jacksonville. Big game tomorrow night against Furman, too. So your thoughts on college basketball season, man? I know we're in the middle of football here, but basketball does start in November, and it is officially underway.
Yeah, I was just telling him before, I guess it kind of stinks at the time that basketball just picks up. It's like right at the end of football. This is when the big games are starting to roll around for that. But at the same time, I mean, it's a breath of fresh air to get basketball rolling again, and to see the men come out and get a win early. Yeah, it's Jacksonville University, but they figured out a way to win when their scorer wasn't. Frank Eves is kind of that guy that, like, if there's going to be a go-to scorer on the team, it's probably him. And for him to play so poorly, not even make a shot from the actual floor, and for them to still figure out a way to win is a big thing to accomplish early on in the year, especially when you're starting a lot of young guys like the freshmen that they brought in. So.
Yeah, I can't really speak a whole lot to the women's game. I didn't see that game, but I was there for the men's game, and a lot of the freshmen really did step up. I mean, Shabazz played really well, or at least in the first half. He struggled from the floor, but he's one of those guys, and really one of the few guys on our team that can create for himself, get into the lane, make the defense collapse, So his play, Amarius Logan played very well, and that'll be nice for Appalachian to really have a solid backup point guard this year, because really last year when Burgess wasn't on the floor, Frank Eves kind of filled that role oftentimes, and Eves is not the kind of guy who is going to score when he has the ball in his hands that often. He's more of a catch and shoot kind of guy. So I think the offense overall will be much more expanded this year for Appalachian.
It kind of reminds me a little bit of the football team, too, in that you've got young players that are going to play significant minutes, and this is an opportunity to really gain some very valuable experience because they're going to get so many minutes early on. I'd be curious to see just what those minutes look like once conference play rolls around, when you got 10, 11 games under your belt, to see where the playing time spread and how much of an impact those guys are having.
Yeah, it's great to see the team finally, I feel like there's a future ahead of them instead of just, the basketball team's playing again. Like, I feel like there's definitely a base that they can kind of focus on, and if they can build off of that we can see a really strong team in, 4 or 5 years. The program just needs that kind of, they need a start. They need this group of guys to kind of jumpstart them into what could be a really, really strong season if they can kind of get everything together. And it is hard with a bunch of young guys to really know what you have right away. But I mean, from what I've seen thus far, it seems like there is definitely a possibility for a lot to happen. So.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, this isn't going to be a men's team that goes and wins the Sun Belt by any means. I mean, I don't think anyone's expecting that. But at the same time, this is a great year to start to see these pieces that Fox that he can draw in. You know what I mean? That last year, that's not Fox's team that he's working with. And so we're starting to see his guys coming in. And no discredit to any of them. I mean, they're all great basketball players, but to measure a coach and to measure the future of a team, we're starting to see that now, and we'll be able to see that blending start this year with the recruits that he's bringing in as the guys who are already on the roster start to phase out.
Yeah. For me, I'd like to see a little more Jacob Lawson. Yeah. He's such an athlete, and when he has the ball at the top of the key, he can drive the lane very well. And especially when the second team offense is out there, I would really like for him to be more of a factor because he's somewhat of a sleeping giant out there. In the Jacksonville game, he had a few very nice putback dunks. So you see the athleticism, you see his ability, but I don't think he asserts himself into the offense as much.
He could be the top shot blocker in the league, without question, and is somebody that in this league, even with this league has turned out lottery picks in I think 3 of the last 4 years, he can be a dominant player against talent like that. It's a matter of getting that consistency, and that's a big part of his challenge going forward will be to deliver that on a night in, night out basis. But if he can, combined with the guard play that has increased depth, I think you've got a chance to see this team be very competitive and versatile, not so one-trick pony as they were at times last year.
Well, and to talk about Lawson, I mean, I think he had 5 blocks in their season opener, and I think on the year last year he only had 28 total blocks. So that's a great way to start out with an exclamation point and say, like, get ready because I'm going to be there. So good start for him, and yeah, like you said, if he can figure out offensively, I mean, he's got the size, he's got all the things that you would look at on paper and say, okay, he could potentially be that, maybe a late pick or something like that, but he's got to assert himself like that.
Yeah, I will say on a few of those blocks, I feel like the refs may have kind of swallowed their whistle.
Yeah,
there's a lot of body on a few of those.
Yeah,
but,
it's going to be, that's one of the early themes of college basketball. You saw so many upsets. It felt like opening weekend of college basketball was more like opening weekend of March Madness because you had so many mid-majors knocking off high majors, but a big part of that was officiating. And, you hear from the NCAA that they're going to change the way they call certain plays in the post, rewarding physicality in some areas, not rewarding it in other areas. No more 5-second closely guarded. A lot of the things that teams used to identify with from a defensive standpoint are going to be pulled back. So what is the byproduct of that? Is that going to be increased offensive efficiency, or is it just going to be sloppy play around the bucket? I think you saw a little bit of both on the opening weekend, and that led to some of those mid-major teams being able to hang inside where they used to not be able to because of the physicality.
Yeah, I think, we'll see over the next, by the time tournament comes around at least, which is when I feel like a lot of people tune into college basketball for the most part, it'll have worked itself out, but it'll be interesting to see how, if at all, how much more of that happens in the next few weeks as people adjust.
Yeah, and one last thing about the Appalachian game, Matt O'Doul played really well. He's a young guy, and I didn't expect to see him on the floor really at all. He didn't certainly have a great game in the box score. He had 0 points and 3 rebounds, but we killed Jacksonville on the boards, and he was a large part of that. He's very scrappy and was very good at tipping the ball out to guys like Eves, who had 8 rebounds, most of which were off of long rebound situations. So Appalachian would be well served to continue that rebounding clip.
So back to college football a little bit here. That seems to be a popular topic on this program. Another wild week. You see Arkansas maybe pulling themselves into some sort of, hey, we're okay in the SEC situation. LSU, a team that many thought was going to be involved in the Final Four, might not even be involved in a top-tier bowl anymore. I mean, this is a team that's really gone south. A lot of movers and shakers here in this particular week that will set up an interesting finish to the regular season.
Yeah, the LSU thing, I wonder how much of that is almost hangover from the loss to Alabama, kind of taking the wind out of your sails type of thing. And Arkansas is one of those teams that, they seem to play everyone close, and 90% of the time they don't pull it out, but they get a marquee win, it seems like, every year over a ranked team. And so good for them. I mean, they're not a team that I ever expect to win win the SEC, but it's good to see them shake things up, if nothing else. But stinks for LSU, I guess. Alabama has an ability to do that to people, I guess.
Yeah, coming into this season, Arkansas did have expectations. They certainly have kind of fallen short of those. I feel like Arkansas and Indiana are having very similar seasons. Both are seemingly very talented teams that can't really get over the hump in some of these games. So it was nice to see Arkansas get that win against a foe that is ranked much higher than them. But the Pac-12, I think they've kind of played themselves out of being in the playoff at this point, not because some of those teams maybe aren't good enough, but just like we were talking about earlier, they've just beat up on themselves. So I think probably that conference can forget about maybe,
And it's unfortunate
winning a
because it's been
championship.
some of the most compelling football that we've seen all year long, too, because of the fact that everybody's competitive and you can't go into a particular game thinking that you've got that game figured out. I mean, it's the underdog rises every single time, it seems like. So looking at the ACC, too, I think a lot of people are curious about North Carolina's position maybe coming into the weekend, and here's a team that just keeps on getting it done, kind of like the Panthers in a sense that everybody keeps throwing darts at them, and they keep deflecting those darts away because right now North Carolina looks like they're on a collision course with Clemson for the ACC title game.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if they get there, I mean, I don't know. I really don't know what to expect. I mean, we talked about it before. There's still that overwhelming sense that like Clemson will mess this up at some point. And people are trying to move away from that, the whole Clemsoning thing. But I mean, North Carolina, you just keep figuring out ways to win. I mean, who knows? You know what I mean? We talked about that with the Panthers. Like, I'll take a team that just knows how to win and just figures it out every single week versus a team who's perennially, blowing people out all the time. And they seem to have that.
And I feel like North Carolina's. I feel like that they could quite easily figure out a way to, overcome Clemson. And I don't think people would see it coming per se. I think that when they get into that game and all of a sudden you kind of be like, oh my gosh, this is happening. I don't think it's going to be like crazy. I don't think that they're going to, jump into the game and be like, we're destroying Clemson and all this stuff. But I see it being a tough fought game that could be the moment when Clemson kind of becomes Clemson again.
Yeah, it'd be one of the best offenses Clemson's seen all year.
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah, well, for fans of the ACC, they need to be rooting for Clemson in this game because if North Carolina wins this game, then much like the Pac-12, the ACC is going to be left out in the cold. So, then what, 2 from the Big Ten, 2 from the SEC, or however it might shake out. But I think North Carolina could give them a close game, but certainly I wouldn't pick Carolina over Clemson. But.
I wouldn't pick them, but I wouldn't be shocked either.
That's safe. I like safety in those kind of situations. Another big game, talking Big 12, that was a conference that last year got left out. They were in that situation with TCU and Baylor. Now TCU has kind of faded away. They had to struggle to beat Kansas the other day. And Baylor had quarterback problems, injury there, finally gets knocked off by an Oklahoma team that all of a sudden looks like one of the top offensive teams in all of college football. Is Oklahoma at a point where they could make a late run at this top 4 deal, or is too much time gone by?
I don't know if they're at the point I don't know if they really have the talent for it yet. I think that they had a great game, and I think that they showed a lot of things that they could do, but I don't think that they have enough for consistently playing the way that they played.
I mean, they did lose to Texas.
I was going to say that will kill them, having that on their record, that they lost to a Texas team that has struggled mightily versus almost everyone this year. That is going to be enough to say no, even with the win over Baylor, because I think nationally there's been so much, everyone was suspect of Baylor. I feel like no one, I mean, great, they can put up 70 points a game, but when they play real talent, can they actually pull it out? And they showed yet again that they can't.
That loss to Texas is much like North Carolina's loss to South Carolina. It happened, and no one really quite understands how those 2 teams could lose to those other 2 teams given where they are now. But in my opinion, if you're the committee, you have to penalize them for losing to Texas, given the season they've had. Unless everything else just breaks wide open and the other contenders have an equally poor loss. I don't see that happening.
Interesting week ahead for college football, and then, of course, rivalry week right around the corner, too, so we'll get to talk about that more as we go on. NFL football, Panthers find a way again. Didn't look great in the first half. Nope. They didn't need to. They were playing the Titans. I mean, let's be honest about it. But Panthers 9-0, getting ready to play Washington. It seems like, again, everybody's trying to find little holes in the armor, but it also seems like the Panthers somewhat regenerate their area of deficiency on occasion, too. And right now, kind of hard hard to stop a train that's moving forward at the rate that they are.
Yeah, I think a lot of it isn't even necessarily that they're the most dominant team out there, but I think it's just they have everything going, and it's going to take a lot to stop a lot of it. I think that they have everything kind of, it's good enough to get it done, and we'll figure out anything else that kind of comes in our way. Not necessarily, okay, we've got it perfect, let's keep playing the way we're playing. It's kind of, we're doing well enough, we'll figure out the issues as they come along, which is a lot. I mean, like we've talked about a lot before, if you can win close games consistently, that's better than winning a couple of blowouts and then being trampled by someone who you shouldn't be trampled by. So,
well, there's nothing really about this game that's unlike the whole rest of their season.
Yeah.
I mean, they haven't necessarily been flexing their muscle to the point of, wow, look how dominant they are. Yeah. But, they just continue to win.
Put the win on the board.
Exactly. And, with playing teams like the Titans, you probably don't need any more than that. The same might be said next week, or this week, that is, against the Redskins, who looked really good against the Saints, but I'm still not exactly sure what the Redskins have to offer.
So
So you're saying you don't like that?
Yeah, but so I don't know, but the people who are saying still that the Panthers aren't quote unquote for real, I can't understand that.
Yeah, they're definitely for real.
Yeah.
Just,
Yeah, I don't
What is
know.
real?
yeah.
Well, and I think
real.
too,
They're
I think
fighters.
a lot of this shows the maturation of Cam Newton because we've talked about he's doing it with no help, and I've drawn the comparison to the New England Patriots about this Panthers team and that they just figure out ways to win. Well, that's because Brady figures out ways to win. I mean, the defense is massively important,
Possibly
and I'm not
dirty
going to. Regardless, I mean, at the end of the day, they're on the stat sheet, and Cam Newton was that way in college too. I know that short stint he had with Auburn, but there were times in games where they'd be down crazy amounts, and that's a far way to reach back. But he had it then, and he's channeling it and figuring it out now.
Yeah.
I mean, the learning curve in the NFL is so steep, and the recent success of quarterbacks coming out like Andrew Luck and RG3 year one doing so well and stuff gets this unrealistic expectation of rookie quarterbacks. And now Cam's gone up, he's gone down and gone through the mud. People have said, oh, he's not the one. And now he's showing like, I'm ready to do this.
Yeah.
And it takes time, but I'm happy for Cam Newton.
Yeah, well, it's great to see on the score sheet, too, that he's putting in rushing touchdowns and passing touchdowns. I mean, it's showing that he is very, he's well-rounded, and I think that's what's really helping them out is that they've got somebody who's, calling the shots and saying, all right, if this doesn't work out, worst thing, I'll grab the ball and I'll just run as fast as I can and hopefully get out of bounds or, take a slide
Lower
or whatever.
the shoulder.
So,
It's Cam Newton. Why not?
Absolutely.
You're bigger than every linebacker in the league.
Yeah,
pretty much.
exactly. So it's good to see that he's kind of realized that he can be the asset that I think he always has been able to be, but this season he's really kind of taken advantage of it in a way that we haven't seen before. So
You're talking about Cam's past. I can't imagine what those guys in junior college, the defensive coordinators knew what to do. At Blinn,
if he rushes and throws for less than 700
exactly.
yards, it's
That's a
win.
moral
It's
victory.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's a reason they won a national championship too.
All right, so speaking of good quarterback play, got this guy Peyton Manning passed another guy named Brett Favre for most passing yards ever. A fairly significant milestone, but he did it on a day that he was one of the statistically worst quarterbacks of the last 10 years.
well, he opened with an interception.
Is it time for Peyton Manning to step aside, or do you say milestone quarterback deserves to write his own script?
I have many feelings about Peyton
I thought you
Manning.
might.
Yeah.
I personally think he should have stepped aside a couple of years ago. I think that he should have ended it with the Colts, and that would have been beautiful, and it would have made me happy.
Self-serving situation
But
there.
no, I think he's gotten to the milestones he needs to get to. I think that he's kind of gotten to the point where he can say, I've made it this far. I got into a Super Bowl. It didn't go as planned, but I think that he's kind of gotten to the point where he can say, it needs to be over. I think that now he's just more than even just his play. I think he's risking a lot of injury. I think that he's playing around a lot with the fact that he's been hurt very seriously multiple
The neck
times.
fusion injuries.
Yeah, it comes down to the fact it's like, do you really want to keep risking it for, you've passed these milestones, you've got all of these accolades now. Do you really want to keep risking it for the chance of putting yourself in a wheelchair or, being very, very hurt and having to spend a lot of time and money to help yourself? So I think that he just needs to kind of say, all right, we got there, and I wouldn't be surprised if he steps down after this season.
The thing I think about Peyton Manning, though, and it came out today, and this is not to mask the fact that he had a terrible performance, but they came out and said that he has plantar fasciitis, and he was playing with that. That's a big deal if you can't plant on your throws, and it would, looking at his stat line, I'm a big time Manning defender. I've been a Manning fan my whole life, and my first thought was something's up, And then hours later, Tony Dungy, a former coach, says the same thing on Pro Football Talk, and you see it. But at the same time, he still has had an atrocious season.
Yeah.
And now that he's got the record, I really wanted to see him get the record versus the Colts just because it's good story,
Yeah.
But now he's got the records, and I think it's time to trail off because regardless of the Broncos' record, I think yesterday showed, like, it can all fall apart like that. They've looked
Yeah.
so impressive.
All right, speaking of records, I'm going to stop you there. We need to put
no.
records up,
Oh,
the
no,
Monday Night
we
Football
don't.
records, because it's
No.
just that time of the show. We've only got a couple minutes left here. The standings are what they are, okay?
Yes,
they
they
are
are.
what we thought they were. That would be me in the lead
I don't understand why we
significantly.
keep handing these things
All
to
right, but
you.
this is going to be easy, right? Because for a sports bar
saying that.
milestone, we're all in agreement.
Oh.
Picks,
Wait,
I
are we?
think.
Bengals, and whoever they're playing.
Well, the Bengals are playing J.J. Watt, and
Right.
He's
I don't
currently the
guy. He's
quarterback
just
of the
one guy.
Texans,
he is,
I think.
he
so.
is their everything, and I don't think he can, man every position at one time.
I don't know.
So,
I'd like to see him try quarterback.
yeah, the Bengals are having a terrific season, and they are kind of managing the game like the Bengals have done the last 3-4 years now, where they just kind of bore you into the win, much like the Panthers are doing this season. So it would be very hard for me to pick against the Bengals, and that's why I'm picking the Bengals. So.
Well, I can't say that I knew who David was going to pick, but I think that's just going to be my strategy going forward. It's just whoever I think I should pick, I'm just going to pick the opposite because for some reason,
Thus far,
it's too
that's been how it
frustrating.
comes out, so.
It's too tough to watch.
So
Monday
you're
Night
going
Football.
Bengals?
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, I'm going Bengals as well for obvious reasons.
All right, just because I want to, full disclosure here, I'm going Bengals.
Okay.
But I'm only going with them because they have a ginger as their quarterback. You cannot bet against a ginger. You just can't do it, especially
Yeah.
if you are one.
We've
There's
been
not that
through that.
many of us.
Just stick
So
together.
it has nothing to do with skill. It has nothing to do with stats. It's dude's got
thus
red
far
hair.
has
If
been
he, if
helping
he
you,
decides
so.
right now that he's not going to play tonight, I'm going to the Texans. I mean,
Or if he dyes his hair.
he's still a ginger
Can't
at
take
heart.
it out.
Yeah, he's still a ginger at heart. All right, that does it for this edition of the Sports Bar. If you don't agree with our Monday night picks or just want to say hi, you can email us at watchapptv.com. Until next week, I'm David Jackson. Thanks for watching Sports Bar. So long, everybody.